Hi, I'm Adam Geis.
I'm David Lurch.
We're hosts of the EdTech Distilled podcast, which is a part of the Education Podcast Network.
Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
It's that time for the high-tech podcast.
Dun,
That's the
dun,
moment
dun,
where
dun.
it was like super cool music would pop in or something. I don't know. I was trying to figure a thing out. Welcome back, everybody. It's the high-tech podcast here. You're joined by myself, Josh, and my co-host, Will.
Yo, what's up? I'm here.
Hey. Or known as Will Ill to some people.
DJ Will Ill.
Yeah, DJ Will Ill. And by some people, I mean just basically us.
That one table at Wes's wedding.
Yeah, that. Or yes, I forgot about that. Yeah, that. And technically, you like DJ'd our wedding, but that was really just because it was on Spotify and we forgot about it and you changed things. I don't remember exactly what happened.
Will, I love you and you're the best person ever, and I wanted you to do that in my life. Like,
Yeah, no,
that's
well,
what you should have said.
yeah, that too, but
Gosh.
also, well, like it's not like you were hired to be our DJ. It was more of me trying to, make it clear that whatever happened at our wedding was not your professional fault. It was
fair.
just
That's fair.
you were, that was for your benefit.
Thank you.
'Cause-
Yes, liability and insurance.
liability, all that stuff. We gotta be careful. Anyway, welcome back to the High Tech Podcast, where we don't DJ very often, except for sometimes.
Except for weddings.
Except for weddings, apparently. Anyway, so we're excited to be back again for another great episode. We're kicking off some things this episode.
We just rolled
We're
one
doing-
down and we're kicking a new
we're
series off.
kicking another series off. People are like, "Gosh, you in a series?" We're like, "I know, it's great, right?" We're doing more series, and this week we're kicking one off. But before we get into those details, we need to do the one thing you've been waiting for, which is the opening spiel, where we remind you that we exist and you should come check us out. So if you're listening to this podcast and you've not done this yet, we just want to remind you that there are some places that you can check us out online other than your handy dandy podcast app, whatever that may be. You can check us out on Twitter. We are on the socials. Hit us up at High Tech Podcast. And we'll do some fun things. We mainly just drop episodes on there, but we are planning to do more, hopefully.
Season 3
And
we'll have more.
Season 3 we'll have some more stuff. We're planning some things. But also, it's just fun to connect with you, So subscribe. Mention us. Be like, yo, Will and Josh, I listened to the podcast, and it was awesome. And we'll be like, that was cool. That's super fun.
Here's your payment now. Thank you. Go
Here's
away.
your payment. Yeah, check us out on there. You can also email us at inbox@hightechpod.us.
.us.
And it's see, this is the argument we have every episode. People are probably really tired of hearing this. They're like, gosh, would you guys just decide? And no, we won't, because we refuse to agree. You can email us there. Both of those places, you can send our wonderful animal picture that we're going to ask for this week. And I'm going to be real. I have not been thinking about this ahead of time. So
I would say an electric eel doing a cartwheel.
wow, that was different. It was just rhyming. It didn't have any alliteration or anything.
That's called assonance.
Oh, okay.
When it sounds similar.
Ah,
I think that qualifies as assonance.
guess what, guys? That was our series. Just learning what words mean. Okay, you figured it out?
Dictionary time with Will.
Yes, Dictionary Time with Will. Actually, I would totally buy into that podcast. I think that'd be hilarious.
Oh no.
Dictionary.
Oh, no.
I feel like we need to make that a thing.
Literally
just
every episode is just a new word.
Not every episode. That's too much. But like every other episode or something. I feel like Dictionary Time with Will would be fantastic.
Dictionary.
So if you think that'd be a great idea, hit us up on Twitter and let us know. And just be like, upvote it with a nice little thumbs up.
Or a Ted Lasso gif. If you send us Ted Lasso gifs, we know that will mean you want me to do.
Okay, see, I feel like that's kind of loaded because somebody could just send a Ted Lasso gift because they like one.
But I like them. I want
Okay, that's
them.
fine. Send a Ted Lasso gif and a hashtag Dictionary Time with Will. Hashtag Dictionary Time with Will.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
Hit that up.
Not
on
gonna
Twitter.
let you make the hashtags in the future.
I feel like it was a pretty great hashtag. It's clear. And I don't know, are there any other hashtag Dictionary Time with Will
That's a great point.
There were a lot of other things I could have done. I feel like that was pretty self-explanatory. I'm a little offended. Gosh.
Might be. I'll back down.
Anyway, okay. Also, we have a website that you can find us at hightechpod.us. We put lots of episode pages on. Our recent series that we just did would be super helpful if you check out that episode page while you're listening to the podcast, because we just did a React series recently, and that React series, each of the stuff we're reacting to is on the page that we release.
Screenshots or videos, good
yeah,
stuff.
videos, things like that, whatever we ended up doing. So check that out as well at our website. There we go. That's the spiel. It's harmless. We came up with a new podcast segment, hashtag Dictionary Time with Will.
And now, for all our audience, the Robin S. Jeffers Learning Taxonomy Series.
I was like, where are you going with this? Yes, it's the Robin S. Jeffers Taxonomy Series.
Learning Taxonomy Series.
Robin S. Wow, this is a really long title for a series.
Yeah, exactly.
Robin S. Jeffers Learning Taxonomy Series. We'll say it one more time. Robin S. Jeffers
Learning
Taxonomy Series. Also known as RFJLT for short. Hashtag.
Robin gave us the idea. Thank you, Robin. You're the best. Can't wait to have you back for Finks. We'll see if that happens. It'll happen.
It'll happen.
But learning taxonomies, I mean, they're nothing new. I've studied them a bunch in undergrad and in my grad classes. But
I've done taxes.
Yeah, Josh does the ones that are due by April 15th. It's the same due date every year.
Yeah, except I take that as a suggestion, not a due date. I'm just joking.
Wow. I wish. But we're just going to do a series on different ones and talk about them, how we think they apply or don't apply, or if we think that they're less than good or not, or if they're even useful. So this episode is on Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's has been around for a long time. It's like the number one that gets talked about. It's the first one I learned about. I bet Josh heard about it even before he got into education. Like, it's just, it's big. It's the number one.
It's the well-known taxonomy. I mean, like, if anybody knows the taxonomy, it's Bloom's.
It's like the Apple iPhone of taxonomies. Like, everyone knows about it. A lot of people have it, but do you really want it? Maybe not.
We don't know. One could say it's like the Kahoot of ed tech,
Ouch.
Like,
ouch.
Or the Flipgrid. Listen, I like both of those tools, but let's just be real. If anybody thinks they know ed tech, it's one of those two.
Flipgrid's got a new name, doesn't it? Sorry, that's
right. They call it Flip. I forgot about that.
Just
side
Flip.
note. Yeah, it's just Flip now. I just noticed that the other day while we were in there. So like Bloom's, that's how we're gonna kick it off. But yeah, the whole idea about the series is we talked with Robin about this. Robin came in and talked about taxonomies in general, but Will and I both agreed that there's a lot to talk about when it comes to taxonomies, and so we were like, let's do a series. And then when Robin was on, we were like, I don't know who said it, but we were like the Robin S. Jeffers series. And Will and I really liked that because we felt like it needed like an engraving,
Yeah,
like I felt like it needed like a
memorial
plaque.
plate.
Yeah, like a memorial plate, even though she's still here. And
rest her soul with us.
Yes, she is still alive, but has passed in the high tech podcast sense. No. I don't know. I got nothing. She'll be in this series. Anyway, you were joking around about it, and she kind of expressed how she thought that was funny, but also didn't think that needed to happen, and we disagreed, so we're doing it anyway. So there you go, Robin.
Yeah.
There's your explanation.
Well, we just need more episode material. So in Bloom's taxonomy, they structure theirs. The visual representation is a pyramid. I don't think it necessarily needs to be a pyramid, but to me, I'll say it does remind me of like the food pyramids we saw.
I was gonna immediately say that.
Okay.
I just like, if I could make one plug. This is outside of Bloom's taxonomy, just in general. If you're gonna make a graphic anymore, okay, from this day forward, to explain something, whether it's a taxonomy, structure, I don't care what it is, just stop doing pyramids, okay? The food pyramid did it already. Yeah. So every time you do yours, we're just going to think of food pyramids, okay? It's been done. The Egyptians figured out the pyramid. Let's do a different shape.
There are other things out there, like the obelisk.
Yes, I would like to see an obelisk taxonomy.
Or a cairn taxonomy.
Yes, exactly.
Us Viking-loving folk are in for
Whatever it may be. A boat. I don't know. Anything but a pyramid, okay? A skyscraper. I got nothing. But anyway, yes.
What really gets me about the pyramid stuff too, like in the food
Is
pyramid,
that it's a scheme?
and I actually waka.
But
Don't get our wives started on MLMs or me actually, or us.
Yeah. No, I love them personally.
The food pyramid is designed visually to suggest that the things at the bottom of the pyramid you should have the most of and more of, and the things at the top of the pyramid you should have less of and maybe sparingly, right?
Oh, that's a good statement.
And I don't like that Bloom's here looks just like that, because if you're not familiar with Bloom's, I'm not going to read everything off to you, but the bottom of the pyramid is typically something like remember. It's about recalling facts. It's about basic concepts. It's just like factoids to put in your brain. That's the bottom of the pyramid. And the top is create. Produce new or original work, design something, assemble, create, formulate new ideas, right? So there's a lot of steps in between those, but the idea would be that you need to remember facts before you can move up to understanding the facts, to applying, to blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. But the pyramid suggests that we should have the most of the remembering, and we're going to have the least of the creating. I think that there are some folks who do scopes and sequences to suggest that as well. Like in the majority of a course, you're going to do remembering and understanding until the end of the course where you do some creating. But I don't think that that's exclusively true. I don't think that that's exclusively true of all courses. Like art courses, you create almost every class you're in an art course. Drawing, painting, even just visual design in general. Like you're going to create something every class you're in with an art class.
Yeah.
But you still have things to remember. It's just like, I don't see this pyramid being an effective way to demonstrate what we actually want people to do with these concepts.
Yeah, now I think from what I know from Bloom's, and maybe I'm wrong on this, is that I don't think that's Bloom's desire, is to say you're doing way more remember than create. I think it's a downside of the pyramid scheme that's been created.
Right.
But so that's an aside. Let's talk about the actual what Bloom's is trying to communicate. So like Will said, you've basically got these handful of categories. You've got remember, which is all about like recalling facts, basic concepts, basically what remember sounds like. Okay. You have
Thank you.
understand.
I'll remember that.
Which is about like being able to explain concepts and ideas. So it's not just remembering like definitions, but it's actually being able to kind of more in detail describe or discuss or kind of identify things, right? So like I think of understand in certain cases, like they may know the definition of gosh, I'm failing to think through what I want to use
assonance.
For this. Yes. Well, yeah, okay. So they may know the definition of the word assonance, which is, we need to pick a new word. But they may know that definition, but can they identify an example of that definition, right? So like that's where I feel like understand fits.
Or carte blanche, that's another favorite of the podcast.
Or one of those things. Or like a concept, like they may know they may be able to give the definition of what cardiac arrest is, but can they identify someone who is in cardiac arrest? I don't know. Sorry, I didn't mean to go there. It was just like the first thing that popped into my head. Yeah, so like those ideas. Apply then, of course, is then taking that, and this is the thing about Bloom's. Bloom's kind of argues this kind of building on top of each other idea, kind of the sequence of how things go. So like you remember first, you understand, then you can start to apply, which means you can actually like, execute the skill, or you can do the skill, you can solve something, you can use the idea, you can take the concept or philosophical idea and you can apply that to a situation or work through it, like these types of ideas, essentially going beyond just knowing what the definition of the idea is, understanding or being able to identify that concept, but actually being able to take that and use it, whatever that looks like in the class. Obviously that looks different depending on your subject material. In the example I gave of medical issue, it might be able to being applied at how to, fix it. I don't, like there's some things, right?
Right.
And then you've got the last three, which is analyze, evaluate, and create. I think analyze, the best way I've always understood this, I'd be curious your thoughts, Will, like, it's always, to me, it's been about like being able to take a look at multiple types of ideas or things and kind of compare them, distinguish, like work through them, evaluate, like if you're working through different types of philosophical beliefs, being able to take all the different ideas that you have and being able to actually like analyze them and evaluate them.
Right.
Well, evaluate's a different thing, but analyze and
if you wanted to look at like different philosophies, right, being able to like look into and analyze ontology versus eschatology or other, maybe that's just theologies, I don't know if they're philosophy elements too, but like you just like studying these different elements compared to one another, that's definitely one thing you're trying to do. There's some suggestions there about like being able to test something, like, all right, so if it's cardiac arrest, that example, analyzing that is like, okay, what are the symptoms? How do we test for that while someone's, so if somebody's like having in distress, but they put their hands to their throat, that should indicate that it's choking, not cardiac arrest. But if they don't put their hands to their throat, maybe it's more on their chest, they're feeling something that's about their heart. Like, these are things you need to be able to analyze and in a sense test, like, do I know that this is cardiac arrest? Do I know that this is an ontological argument? Can I identify a logical fallacy? Like, those analysis steps, I think, are really helpful for not just like, hey, I can give you a dictionary definition of cardiac arrest, or I could even show you where the heart is on the body that it, applies cardiac arrest. But if you were to give me like definitions of it, I could point that out. You know what I mean? Like, do the reverse of, I can define it and I can identify it. I think that to me is analysis.
Yeah. Well, and I think like that's a good way to put it. And I think like putting in other ideas, like we've talked about, like, for instance, in a counseling course or something like that, where they're dealing with simulations or stuff like that, where they work through, like, to me, like, and I know I'm not a counselor, so I'm just going to pretend like I know concepts. So work with me if you're a counselor. I'm sorry. Forgive me. But like in that type of situation, like just working through stuff, right? So like, because I see people often get confused between understand and analyze. And so like, to me, it's like, okay, I'm able to identify or look through that, like, if a professor or something gave me a bunch of examples of something that they might see at a home or something like that, I might be able to identify the type of scenario or situation I'm dealing with. I'm sure there's terms using. I don't know why I'm going counseling, but that's the only thing I'm thinking of right now. The analyze part, though, might be a little bit more complex, where it's not necessarily it tells you symptoms or things like that, but might actually just be kind of describes the situation.
Right.
And what you might be seeing.
What might cause cardiac arrest, or what's happening
but
while
like
they're
won't
in
actually
cardiac
give
arrest.
you clues to what it is, or like these are, or not even say, I could see in many cases, not even say these are symptoms, just saying, hey, there's a person who has this, this, and this
right
in front of you, or a picture of that person based on these four options.
I think there's
like,
a big,
analyze it.
and I think you're actually getting to it with like the pictures and things. I think there's a difference between understand and analysis too, where in understanding, like, I'm probably going to be able to just do that with a textbook. It's going to be pretty straightforward, definitions, maybe some pictures, but analysis, I think that's going to maybe draw us closer into the field. Like, I think we're going to have to maybe watch videos or see, test information about it. Like, when you're in cardiac arrest, there's information about your heart and your rate and your pulse and like whether you perspire and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, analysis should drive you closer to the actual material you're working in, and not just like text related.
Another good example, like I work in like theological education, right? So like you've got different theological beliefs and things that they look at. And so I might say, does this person, so for an understand, right? I might say this person believes this about the Bible, believes this about, God, believes this, and give them options and say, which of these kind of theological camps would this person sit in, right?
Right.
I feel like that feels more kind of like identifying, as opposed to I give you a piece of work from someone,
right,
and say, who is this? Where do they stand? Like, what camp are they
This
in?
theologian said this. What do they fit
Yes.
into? Right.
Like, what different? Because that's going to be more analyzed. Because especially in there, it's not necessarily the person's not going to maybe come from one camp. They're complex. They might have some different ideas to them. So you're analyzing kind of the pieces of it,
which is a little ironic because this is so tightly tied to me to evaluate. Like, I think there's, if you just think about the semantic meaning of evaluate, I don't see it being too far from analyze, and some of the suggestions that the taxonomy gives for like other verbs and things you could use this to do. But in evaluate, the one that Josh and I are referencing this evening, the Bloom's taxonomy says that you need to justify. So it's not even just like, at least here the differentiation is with analysis, like we're recognizing, we're reading into, we might be questioning or testing, but evaluate is going to make sure that at the end of the day, if you're going to be doing an activity on some of these things, you take it one step further, not just like, oh, that's an apple, but I know the quality of an apple, and I can justify to you that this is an apple because it's red, it's this shape, it was grown on a tree, and it has seeds inside of it. You know what I mean? Like, I need to know those qualities, and I might remember those qualities and come to understand those qualities, but until I can stand there and like have a physical apple in front of me and differentiate that apple from an orange by being able to tell you all the qualities that make it an apple. You know what I mean? Like, this is finally the simplest metaphor I think we've used this episode so far. That to me is helping like make this distinction between analysis and evaluation, where we're actually getting a step further. And it's like, put something in front of me. I'll tell you what it is and why it is that. We have to analyze it first and be able to go through some of those steps to understand what it is. But once we really know it, then we can start to evaluate those things and stand by what we actually know to be true. You know, this is the ironically the constant joke question of like, why is the sky blue, or is the sky blue, right? Like, unless we evaluate, unless we get to the stage of evaluation, folks might not be able to prove that the sky is blue. Josh, I don't know. Do you know like the scientific reason why the sky is blue? I know it's like light and the water in the air or something. Like. Well,
no, it's because somebody took a paintbrush and they made it blue, right? With like, isn't that what happened? Right? Or like somebody shot blue like dye into the sky and it just never came down.
It just stuck. Yeah,
that's what I've assumed.
Sure.
I actually see the sky as just dark red all the time, so it's a little terrifying. But that's how.
I didn't mean to.
That's how my life is. So like you do make a good point. Like, analyze and evaluate are pretty close together, and that will come into one of my issues with Bloom's here in a second. But yeah, I think to your point, evaluate, that is the difference, right? Is like they're talking about actually like not just analyzing what they say, but then also making a decision or how well they did thing. Like a good example, right, I might ask you in a speech class to analyze the type of tactics somebody made in a speech.
Oh, yeah.
Right? But I might ask you to evaluate how well was that speech done.
Yep.
Was that a good speech? Like, that's different in that area. And then the last one's create. It's this idea of making something, right? Whether like in a speech class, actually doing a speech, right? In a theology class, like actually writing your own theological beliefs on things like that. In a whatever doctor course we just came up with, actually fixing a person. No, I'm just like, fix them. Fix them, but in serious ways. In create, that might be like, maybe we're teaching them on how to identify these issues. In create, I might then have them write on how they might address those issues, like to create something of their own.
Well, in our tanks class, you know, they would need to make a tank. Like, clearly we have our objectives aligned.
Yeah, the part about create is that the student is doing something. They're using the skill. The idea behind Bloom's is they're using the skills that they've done in these other categories, the remember, knowledge, the understand, applying, analyzing, evaluating, all that type of learning to kind of bring it together into creating something.
Yeah.
So that's Bloom's. Now, just if you're curious, in 1956, Bloom's did use different stuff. So if you're looking up Bloom's, I'm not going to say all of them, but they changed Bloom's for some reason.
The most common one is the 2001 revised version. That's what most people refer to.
Which is kind of what we're looking at. So now, before we get into positives and negatives, I just want us to postulate for a second why. Well, actually, no, never mind. Let's get into positives, negatives, and then I'll get to my point because I think it's going to make sense.
Don't forget it.
And positives. Let's do positives first because I won't forget it because it's a part of my positives. So I'm going to jump in.
All right, go for it.
I will say this.
Good setup, by the way. Love that. Really, just
exactly. Just
chip
nailed
yourself
it.
up
just
there.
Really, just really.
I want to
did
talk
well.
about something, so I'm going.
It was seamless. No one noticed it.
Fourth wall.
That's what we're here. Transitions. So we talked about this with Robin when she was on, but like, why is Blooms so popular? Like, why is it the thing that everybody knows? And I think it has to do with my positive. Blooms goes out of its way to make kind of clear, understandable terms for learning. So like, remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. We just spent forever explaining it, but at the end of the day, if you read those, most people with a short definition can figure out what we mean by those. And so I do think it's a taxonomy that's easily plug and play. Like, I think a lot of people who don't have a ton of, like myself, who didn't have a ton of background in education, and
Right.
like a background in learning education, I can pick up Blooms pretty quickly. I'm like, oh, okay, this makes sense.
And how many
Like,
times have you come into other education theories where you're just reading it and it's like intellectual narcissism, like they're just using all these big long words and theories and back to back. It's like, what? This is like one word definitions. It's very simple.
It's very simple, and like, as we talk about other taxonomies, there's a lot of other taxonomies, and several that I like better than Bloom's. But they tend to use a lot of big terms that it takes more time to explain than actually like understand. Like, it's like we have to do all this work to kind of explain what the terms are, and that's one of the positives I think of Blooms.
Something
that they try to do that.
Ironically, now that we're like a whole Robin's worth of an episode and 20 something minutes into this episode, one of the reasons this is all very, very relevant is that these are the verbs and the language that's used to drive learning objectives and learning outcomes. Like, that's why I think this is so important and why this one's so popular, because if you have hundreds of thousands, millions of teachers, I don't know, across the states. I really don't know how many teachers there are, but you know what I mean? If you have so many teachers who all have to write learning objectives, then a system like this works, where they can write an objective, say the student should remember, blah, 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 blah. The student should understand, blah, 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 blah. And they're using all the different, synonyms and stuff like that for it. But at the end of the day, I would like something as simple as this to do all of that, because they have to write so many objectives for every lesson plan, every unit plan, every module, every semester. It's a part of everything.
Yeah. And I will say, just putting aside the learning objectives things, these are things that people do. I mean, they try to remember things, try to understand things, they apply things. Like, what Bloom's labels out here is real stuff that's happening during learning.
Yeah.
So, like, I do think that's why it's so popular, and I do think Bloom's has a lot of benefit because of that. Like, I do think there is some benefit from Bloom's. And I will say, I do like that they try to create kind of like a linear path a little bit. I do think Bloom's goes out of its way to try to figure out, okay, kind of a structure to go by, like kind of how you're aiming almost. Like, here's where you can kind of start, and here's where we want to see you finish. Like, because that often is the most difficult thing for people teaching and learning, is like, okay, where do I start? How do I get people to my objectives? How do I and so Bloom's kind of can try to give you a roadmap. Now I have negatives for that, but I'm curious if you have any other positives. I don't want to steal the talking space. Do you have any other positives?
Well, thank you for setting me up to offer some. I'm joking. No, I think that like the simplicity of it's really great. I think that at the same time that the, I guess, top level or the superficial level of the taxonomy is clear, remember, understand it. But it's really cool that it's really cool for me to know that, like, even as we're looking at it, there's stuff on the right. There's more that's down and beyond it. So you almost have like the layers at which you need to understand it yourself. Like, okay, the little mnemonic or the pyramid to like remember the simple sequence from the recalling to the creating. Great. But then there's this next layer of like, oh, a little bit more definition of what we want them to recall, what we want them to understand. Like, what are they, explaining ideas. Like, there's a little more to it. But underlying it all is like, this is a focus on the cognitive ability of someone to learn. And it has to focus on their abilities with like physical skills and mental skills. There might be some balance between those if it's like music and something like that, right? They have to understand notes, but be able to produce notes. There's abilities, like it's not just cognitive. You know what I mean? Like it looks very cognitive, and we know create gets to maybe sometimes physically using your hands to do something, but each of these elements requires and leaves space for the whole human dynamic. This is not just a taxonomy for sit the kid in front of a desk, make them memorize all the content. It is trying to push people to learn, think, and do, which I really like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, is it both simple, like I just said, and I kind of a little complex because of that? Maybe, but like at the end of the day, like if you can get it down to the fact that they can learn, do it and create, like that's great for me as a starting point.
Yeah. Now, here comes the negatives, okay, because all the parts we enjoy. So, and listen, Will and I made this clear in the episode we talked. I think you said this well, Will, when we were talking to Robin. And it'll come up again, is like, we do believe you should use a lot of, like, yes, okay, a lot of people pick a singular taxonomy. The office I work in has a taxonomy they work off, but I do think it's helpful to be aware of all taxonomies and leverage what you can from each one, because each one I think has helpful things to give us. That's Bloom's included.
Take the good stuff.
Yeah, take the good stuff. Now, my criticism of Bloom's, as somebody who's newer, let's just be real into this space, okay? I am not seasoned 15-year teacher who's been using Bloom's, okay? So if you like Bloom's, I'm not saying you shouldn't like Bloom's. I am learning. I still have a lot to learn. Will and I both still have a lot to learn. This is us processing out loud how we feel, okay?
Yeah.
Here's how I feel, okay? One thing I struggle with Bloom's kind of does a building thing, right? So you need to remember, understand, then apply, then analyze, then evaluate, then create. You're kind of building. I take issue with that with Bloom's. I don't think learning is that linear. For instance, like you can create sometimes to remember a concept. It actually helps you to make something, like to do something. That will help you better remember what you're trying to do, right? Or to your point, analyze and evaluate. They go so close together. It's not as simple as just analyze this, then when you evaluate it. A lot of times it's kind of an intermixing of evaluating and analyzing.
You're doing the other.
Right, yeah. Like, or sometimes applying something helps you better understand the concept or remember it, right? So like, I don't think it's nearly as kind of a building block linear system to learning. And the reason was,
ironically, how I was starting with that pyramid thing at the beginning of the episode, like that's my issue with it. Like I don't think the visual description is the best way to describe it. Like they failed with their own device that way. Yeah.
And we've seen it go negative. Like people will then take Bloom's and be like, okay, I'm going to do like remember every week. I'm going to have a remember, understand.
Oh my gosh,
like this.
It gets abused so much.
Yes. And I'm okay with taking learning taxonomies and trying to integrate them regularly into the weeks. Like I've done that in work that we do. And I think that's helpful sometimes, especially if you're trying to kind of make sure you're having some kind of significant learning happening. But I think Bloom's just leads people to making it over linear and thinking like you can only learn something if you do this and this first, and like it's just learning's more complicated than that. And sometimes I think it's more of kind of I'd like a circle, like or some type of thing. I feel like it's which is maybe my preference towards I'm not that far from Robin's preference of Finks, which we'll talk about later. Like
which is barely a shape by the time you're done with it.
Yeah, by the time you're done with it. But like that might be why I like that concept a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's also why we'll talk about webs at some point. Which is what our office uses. And Webs kind of does a different thing, which is like they have same concepts. There's different levels to learning, but they don't believe that they all happen in order. They believe that they can kind of be a little bit more intermixed than that.
One of the things then that I think is my biggest takeaway out about Bloom's, and it's ironic, I think that we find this in like faith and the church. I think that we find this in some of at least my beliefs about policy and social environments. Like, this is a really easy system, and it's a very approachable system, and so it traps people into using it poorly. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's so, this is so, okay, great. So I just need to make some remembers, and then I'll make some it's like, no, you need the kids to learn. You need your students to understand your materials. This is meant to help you describe what it takes to get there. But if you're first starting with the fact of like, how many members do I have, and have I used any creates this week, and like all that kind of stuff, like you're already it grinds my
humans
gears.
like boxes, and this is why we like taxonomies.
Yes.
And this is also my issue with taxonomies, that life is more complicated than boxes. So like in the positive of Bloom's is I think it gives us an easy way to start terming learning. Okay.
Yes.
I think the negative of it is it makes it seem too easy to just systemize learning, which is not how learning works. And so Bloom's, that can be a negative of it. So either way, though, I think there's a lot to learn from Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's has helped me a lot when trying to think through how I classify different types of things students are trying to take away or learn. Or even like whether they mean it to do this or not, the depth of what type of learning I'm asking students to do. Bloom's is absolutely helpful for that. Like if the whole course is just them memorizing things, well, we got a problem. That's a lot of point. That's like just a lot of like remembering things. Yeah, and like Bloom's helps highlight those issues.
I'm feeling like a little motivated to say, or like inspired to be like, to me, the goal of these taxonomy sessions will of course be for us to dig into them and talk about them. We nerd out about this. This is fun.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna say like #untaxonomy your learning. Like taxonomies are great, but you need to take the good things from them. Don't get stuck in them. So like if you are a taxonomies first person, my encouragement to you would be untaxonomy yourself. Like take the best of it and use that. That's it.
New hashtag. Hashtag untaxed. Nope.
Yes.
Untaxed.
Yes. Untaxed.
Because
untaxed.
it can apply to this. And also, we should use it just because I'm pretty sure there's a hashtag untaxed already. That's much more popular because of taxes. So like we'll totally get some serious
I'm all for this.
Anyway. That's Bloom's. Again, I'm sure there's a lot we could talk about, but we're a podcast who doesn't like to do super long episodes. So that's what you're going to get. Okay, we talked a little bit about Bloom's with Robin. So combine those two, you got a great discussion, and then you can have strong opinions about Will and I and our views on Bloom's later.
Here's the most superficial transition that's ever been superficially transitioned. I came up with Untax because I was looking at our app today, which is Untools.
Yes. That's cool. So, yes, the app we're here to talk about today is called Untools, which you're like, Will, Josh, don't you guys like tools? Why do you want to get rid of them?
No, I don't.
And we have, I mean, I like tools. They get stuff done, but that's, fine. Like hammers. I can do things with hammers. Just saying. Not that I can't do with my head. Without pain.
Where is this going?
So tools are great. Anyway, okay, we'll talk about Untools. Free me from this mic for a second.
Step away from the mic. Untools is actually a simple structure, a simple platform. It's untools.co. It's very beautiful. I love this user interface, user experience, but it's actually not even necessarily an app as much as it is like frameworks in digestible ways that you can use. And it's like, we've looked into it a little bit. Some of these are going to become apps. They're working on turning these into things that you can use. But for instance, I'm going to go into one called the 6 Thinking Hats. You might be familiar with this. Justin talks about it all the time. I really love it.
Yeah, we have it on a lot of our courses.
If you go into untools.co and you click on the 6 Thinking Hats decision-making app, quote unquote, it's just a protocol. It gives you the 6 Thinking Hats protocol. There's 6 different hats. Each has a color. Each color represents something: positivity, creativity, emotions, data, negativity, process. And it shows you an example and a takeaway for how and why you might use this protocol in a business context, or of course you could use it just in a social context, or like us, a learning education context. So you might create a discussion where you assign your 6 students or your 6 participants each a hat and ask them to come at the conversation or come at the issue you're working through from the perspective of the hat they're assigned. Yellow being positivity, green being creativity, etc. So the fun of this as a protocol is it gets your students or your participants to think about the issue at hand from a different angle. A very famous thing that I've seen in this way, or talked about kind of at a collaborative psychosocial experiment, is the shopping cart. I forget the reference, and there's research and some experiment that's out there, but like group of thinkers came together and they were supposed to make the better shopping cart. Was there one that wouldn't drop things and could hold more stuff and be more practical and blah, blah, blah. And they got all these people together and started trying to think about it in different ways. And like, it didn't actually, like, they came up with prototypes and they had one that they thought was going to revolutionize the world. And you show it in the video and I'm like, that's nothing like the shopping cart I use at the grocery store today. Clearly it didn't work. But that's an activity where they tried to like look at something simple, the shopping cart, and think of it in a new way. The 6 thinking hats is an example of an activity or a protocol you could use that way. That's one of something like 20 or so protocols that they have on here. They have the Eisenhower matrix, which is a quadrant. Top left is urgent and important. Bottom right is not urgent and not important, right? And so you then top right is urgent and not important. Bottom is not important but not urgent. And you're supposed to use that to prioritize your work and make sure you're thinking through what you're working on. This gives you the protocol on how to use this in kind of a conversational or group experiment way. Gives you a takeaway on what to do. Even gives you a worksheet on how to try it out. So. It's not like this Untools thing is one app you download, you're just going to revolutionize your classroom. It's, hey, I've been really struggling to get my students to collaborate. What's something I can use to help them do that? Maybe you look at 6 thinking hats. Maybe there's a conflict resolution diagram that you need because they're actually having issues when they collaborate. So we need to resolve the conflict, and there's something to work with it there. I'm not familiar with all of these. I know situation behavior impact, SBI model. That's for like giving feedback. I've never heard of the Minto pyramid. I've never heard of the Ishikawa diagram, though I recognize the image. Like there's a lot on here that I'm even interested in just like checking out and understanding better.
And they've got some categories like system thinking, decision making, problem solving. So yeah, I mean, I like the concept. I think this reminds me a lot of like a thing we did in our office, which was like an activity catalog. It was specific towards like different types of activities that you could use in online courses. But this is more of like like a procedural or activity catalog in that it gives you like an activity concept or idea or procedure that you could do with your students, but it gives it to you in a way that you can kind of flex and do it in any of the courses or any way or system or tool that you're using, right? So it's like, it's not their anti-tool. It's that they're giving you ideas that could be used in multiple different environments, right?
Well, I like thinking of it as an anti-tool though.
Yeah, well, you be you. So anyway, it's a cool website, cool place to check out. Again, it's untools.co.
It's free.
It's free. Yeah,
it looks like somebody's brainchild, and that's it.
Yeah, it looks like he's trying to eventually sell actual tool like templates in a tool. I think it's in Notion. So which just wins me over already, but that's fine. So it's a great idea. I'm definitely they were featured on Product Hunt, so they're pretty cool. So go check them out. Yeah, that's all I got for that. It's be Untools.
Kind of its own home run, like wow, great. Use it, enjoy. I think the hardest part maybe was just taking the time to read through all the protocols so you understand what's there, so you know to use it if you want to. You know what I mean? If you haven't, if you don't check things out, you won't know that it's there to use it. So
exactly. So
awesome. Thanks, folks. This has been another episode of the High Tech Podcast. I think we have a wrap for this week. There's more taxonomies to come. Next episode 73, we're going to look at Gagne's taxonomy. And the app Remind, which has had a couple different names over time, but we'll dig into Remind. It's like a texting thing for classrooms. Gagne's taxonomy is going to be a little more fun for me. I like this one because I think it's a little more circular than linear, but I look forward to digging into that.
I'm going to be bored. I won't show up. It's not going to be fun for me at all.
Swartz Joshua.
Yes.
Swartz Joshua, are you here? Taking roll call. Just want to make sure you're attending.
No, I left. I'm gone.
Bummer.
Remind me later. But nailed it.
Oh, I'm so proud of you. I love that.
It's those jokes that keep bringing the people back.
4 of them. Hey, folks, find us on Twitter at High Tech Podcast. Like us, subscribe, follow our weekly tweets. Hopefully more coming soon. Send us emails at inbox@hightechpod.us. And you can find our website, hightechpod.us, where all of our episodes have a resource page with information for you, like the Untools app today. There'll be links, images, all that kind of fun stuff that Josh creates because he remembered a lot about Notion.
Yes, and sometimes I remember to post the page.
Thank you again for joining us another week as we continue to learn what it looks like to harness technology in the classroom, whether it be online or in person. Until next time, see ya.
See ya.